Alright, time for another draftphysics.com video presentation. I guess it'd be a YouTube update video. Well, Dr. Lincoln bit first, and then we'll do some other stuff about kinetic energy and the experiments, the evidence, which is horrible. So, alright, to the Dr. Lincoln stuff. So this is just such sham, fake, phony science. I mean, he sets up this video as if there's a contest between Newton and Einstein on some other subject than relativity. That would be the only one. And all the Newton stuff really is Galileo, Descartes, and Newton, especially when it comes to any of this squaring stuff. And it's against Leibniz. Again, a person who overtly stated, okay, to Newton and Descartes that their physics was too atheist. Alright, so this is the physics they're defending. And it's all based on what you can understand as a simple misunderstanding of the force of gravity, which is a unique force. It's different than all the other forces, all the other interactions where momentum changes something in the terrestrial world, in our real world, happen happen as events that have everything to do with a material object and a material object. There's no nuclear forces involved. Where gravity is a nuclear force. Gravity is a force that's acting on the tiniest bits. It doesn't care whether it's one atom. You put one atom next to the moon and it moves in the same orbit as the moon. It's just about the mass as the tiniest portion of your mass. You could just break the Earth into little pieces and it would stay exactly in the same orbit. Alright, so we'll draw a little tiny bit of it and just say this is what it's all about, and it's stupid, okay, and it's just led to wrong physics. They have no experimental evidence. There's no video somebody's going to link me to that shows kinetic energy being collected. They're never going to show it taking 4 times more fuel to go 60 miles an hour than 30 miles an hour. They're never going to show an 8-pound ball going 16 miles an hour knocking down twice as many pins as a 16-pound ball going 8 miles an hour. They're never going to show a small wrecking ball knocking down more buildings. They're never going to show a bullet flying out of a spaceship at 2,000 joules turning a spaceship more than the gun going out the other side at 2 joules. They'll never show anything demonstrating kinetic energy to be correct. So understand, when Leibniz first suggested it, nobody bought it because people made this simple argument that, well, now there's free energy, now there's perpetual motion. Because if I try to mix the two, momentum and kinetic energy, mv squared, it was mv squared back then. If I try to mix these two, one of them ends up creating free of the other. So unless I'm using objects that are the same mass, every time I use differential masses, I'm going to get an answer that's going to be free kinetic energy or free momentum. So they're not compatible ideas at all. They're completely incompatible. Alright, and so they only exist for one reason, so let's get to that part. So Dr. Lincoln, the amount of time you spend with these gimmicks, paying people to put these graphics on, where you're making this into a Newton-Einstein thing when it's not a Newton-Einstein thing, all that. If you spent that much time just reading a little bit of the history, you'd hear how stupid the arguments were, back in 1670, how really dumb they were, how so incomplete, so far from getting to a truth. But you don't do any of that. You just declare the truth. And you haven't looked at the history, you haven't paid any attention whatsoever. Alright, so gravity does this thing, okay? It seems unintuitive and it seems crazy, okay, simply. Okay, I mean, I have a 2 mass and I have a 1 mass. Dramatically, they're more proportional. Oh, I'm supposed to put the camera on. Yay! Alright, all these little details, blah, 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 blah. Alright, and the truth is that this goes, the same energy will move this 1 tiny unit of distance, and the same energy will move this the 4 units of distance. And the logic is, twice the energy. So twice the energy gets you 4 times the distance. And I could use an object that was the same size, and it's still 4 times to double the velocity. And obviously what Galileo found was this 1 to 3 relationship. In the first unit of time, you go 3 units of distance. And in the last unit of time, you do the 1. So obviously when this has only 1 unit of time, it only does this one part. If it had twice the velocity, it would do this 3 part first, okay, and then it would be 4. So obviously in our real world, like in a lever, okay, even though an object, I can put a 1 mass and then I can have a 2 mass, half the distance, all right, and those two things will balance. But when they oscillate, this one only oscillates twice as much in terms of distance. It doesn't do the 4 times thing because the lever is doing the conversion. So the simple reason this happens is because there's 2 factors. Okay, it's kind of important to understand that because gravity is only working on the little tiniest bits of your mass. Okay, that let's say I have a half mass object. Alright, let me just pause because I don't want to make a mistake, because it does work with masses of the same mass. Alright, so my little verbal error is I can use the same energy if I half this mass, and I'll get this result. If I use twice as much energy, because I'm trying to, I'm creating twice as much velocity, then I can use the same mass. So I only put twice as much energy in, yet I go 4 times the distance. And you can sort of understand the reasoning why that happens is because you end up going through this gravity. You go through this much space, but it's only a second of gravity. It's only one portion of the time. So gravity, if you thought of gravity as just simply being a rain, you can understand that, yeah, the faster you go through rain, the less wet you get. So if there was a hole in the roof and you ran past it, the faster you run past that hole, the less rain that hits you. And that goes for the rain coming at you. All right, it's just a fact that if you go through it faster, you'll hit fewer raindrops. Fewer raindrops will be in the area that you're in, and therefore you'll hit fewer of them. And so that's why objects go 4 times the height, is because as they gain velocity, they get less wet. They have to fight less gravity. So the faster you launch, the faster you lift something off, the less energy you have to use to get it to a higher and higher location, less miles per gallon. Now, in regular collisions on Earth, none of that's true. There's not some force acting on the mass of the object. It's just hitting, okay? And it either transfers or it doesn't. It reflects. But there's no factor. There's no wind that you have a sail to catch. There's no raining force. So it's none of this applies. Now they're trying to force this gravitational thing to fit this terrestrial thing, and that's the big mistake. So because Leibniz understood this is how gravity works, he was assuming that that's how everything works. And the other forces aren't gravitational rain. The other forces are material things hitting material things, not a force hitting material things. Forces interact with matter differently than matter interacts with matter, and that's the huge distinction. But that's the only reason why the only reason why there's an mv 1/2 mv squared is because physicists, scientists didn't really understand the distinction between forces acting on matter and matter acting on matter, and they're distinctly different. So we'll play some of this. This is just crap. It's just propaganda. It's fake, fraud, phony science. So it's just this introduction. The video subject is so obscure and meaningless. Nobody could care. I mean, nobody. There's nobody who could say how fascinating. It's so unfascinating. It's just an abstract formula used as a gimmick. Again, another gimmick. The gimmick that Einstein used to prevent his singularity from becoming a negative number, so to speak, to prevent the increasing line from ending up being infinite. And that's all. I mean, well, not infinite, being crashing through, you know. So he had to make it go forever. So they put this stupid thing in where you do the 1 minus almost 1. So every number has to be an almost 1. So you just take a little bit off the other number just to make sure you never hit 0. Alright, anyway. I've got to fix a couple of settings. Sorry. Should have done that ahead of time, but whatever. Yeah. Alright, make sure this volume is adequate. It's adequate.
Physics. You begin with the basics and build on them.
Alright, so the basics, it would be nice if you built on the basics and then actually proved things before you stated them as absolute facts. And the fact is, there's no physical evidence in the conversation. So in the conversation between momentum and kinetic energy, there's no experimental data that's used as part of the argument. It's just an abstraction.
Eventually you find that you move beyond the basics and no longer can recognize where you came from. In this video,
so you're so distant from making sure anything is correct that you have all these errors now in your understanding. So I've already pointed out to you that your wave particle duality nonsense based on the double slit experiment is all based on a bunch of canards. The idea that the Young diagram actually works. When it doesn't do the double slit, it does the single slit. I mean, it's, you know, so many errors, and you don't respond or account for any of them. You don't show any evidence, and you don't even show any history to defend any of the mush you preach.
I want to talk about one of the first topics one learns in an introductory physics class, kinetic energy.
Okay, that's not true. Anyway, it's not one of the first subjects, frankly. Newtonian momentum is taught first. So again, just another, you know, I don't really have to pay attention to the truth, do I? The conservation of momentum, Newton's laws come way before any conversation about this wacky, well, we do have this 1/2 mv squared craziness that causes all kinds of wooey nonsense. That's basically telling you things you know you can't be true. That 8-pound bowling balls knock down twice as many pins, yet there's not a single professional bowler that can use a lighter ball and win. Not a single one.
How it eventually seems unrecognizable. Let's see where that takes us.
Yeah, right. You don't start at the right place and you don't go to any place reasonable. Blah, blah, blah. We're doing something important. We're really important. The big universe, important. So this is a big lie. Kinetic energy, Newton versus Einstein. Who's right? So obviously kinetic energy, Newton opposed it. He's actually going to concede the argument that Newton opposed it. And yet he's put Newton's name on it. You can't see how dishonest and disgusting this is to put somebody's name on it and say, it's like saying Einstein is defending entanglement. You know, even though he's famous for saying spooky action. He's famous for creating thought experiments that are supposed to make you look ridiculous. And somehow you put on the silly hat and say, no, it looks fine, I'm great. I love this silly hat.
Before we start, I'm obligated by contract to warn you that...
So this is a big lie, again. So these are all his little silly puns, all these little jokes he's got to tell. You know, it's like he's doing the Tonight Show or something. Yeah, why don't you do your golf swing? I mean, what the fuck? So your audience is supposed to be smart people, and they need this. They need a bunch of time wasted telling little punny jokes.
This video is way more mathy than most. It's not dreadful, but...
it's dreadful. It's the most obscure, infinite equations, okay? Equations that actually are infinite, okay? And what you know is that, 90% of the infinity doesn't matter, okay? Because it's such an infinitesimally small number that it doesn't add up to anything. You know. But, I mean, still an infinity.
If you're a math phobe, you might have nightmares, so viewer discretion is advised. No plus or equal signs were harmed in the production of
I think they were. I think the whole thing is a neurological nightmare. I mean, something over something squared to the root of 2/3 multiplied by 6. I mean, it's retarded.
this video. However, in the spirit of full disclosure, the square root pulled a muscle, but...
Oh, another, I mean, you know, pun. I can't, you know, it's just so hard to struggle through this existence. This is what you waste your neurons on. See, instead of reading the history of Leibniz and Newton, instead of, I mean, shit, it's the same guy who's, you know, basically accused of stealing Newton's calculus. I mean, and you just couldn't care less that Leibniz had the shittiest arguments possible. Leibniz's argument in defense of mv squared was, you're wrong, okay, I'm right. That was his frickin' argument. He didn't have any other argument.
It's expected to make a full recovery, so it's all good. The idea of kinetic energy originates from the era of Newton, although...
No. Okay, it is the same error. All right. But it has nothing to do with Newton. It has to do with Newton's worst enemy in life. So it's the formula of Newton's worst fucking enemy. A guy who caused Newton more harm and pain in the ass trouble than anyone else on Earth.
So Newton himself wasn't a fan.
Yeah. So he's showing Newton's picture and he's saying Newton himself wasn't a fan. So anything that happens in this decade, I can blame on you. So anything that, okay, let's say rap music happened in your lifetime. It's your fault. You caused it. You made it. You created it. I can blame everything blighty and sucky about what human beings are doing now on you because it happened in your generation. So the war was your fault. You bombed Iraq. You're a psycho teacher killer and kid killer. You're all the things that are happening now. It's your fault. I mean, this is such bullshit. I mean, how the fuck can you sit there and, I mean, Newton is, you know, I mean, is, okay, he's a legitimate king. I mean, he's a legitimate king of being smart and dedicated and spending a whole lifetime pursuing answers to questions. And here you are, you know, taking his dead corpse and puppeting him and making him say things he didn't say. You don't see how evil that is? I mean, that's just overtly evil to slander Newton with this crap he hated. He didn't believe it, and he thought it was obnoxious that this asshole would even say this crap about some sort of mv squared magic.
Indeed, it took several decades before physicists could even agree
on...
So
obviously, yes, Leibniz died nobody because everybody figured out he's a kook, all right? And so then some fancy pants rich woman decides she can publish and she can almost write, and so she writes a bunch of baby talk on the subject, and people fall for it because she has little clay experiments and little silly sand experiments, and people are fooled by these antics. So just like, you know, I don't know whether you've heard of the Pharaoh cell, right? Woo, light bends. Yeah, gimmick, okay? Gimmicks. All right, she won the argument with gimmicks.
What kinetic energy was. But that's all history, and there's no longer any debate on the topic.
So there's no longer any debate, even though you still have zero evidence. You can't show me it taking 4 times more fuel to go 60 miles an hour. You can't show me the professional bowler throwing the 8-pound ball, or the 4-pound ball, or the 2-pound ball, because that would have 8 times more frickin' energy. You can't show me any of it. Because it's all a big, fat, stupid, retarded mistake. And you won't own up to any of it, and you won't research any of it, and I can't even pay you to show me how I'm wrong. You won't take my frickin' money.
Kinetic energy is the energy of motion. That motion could be moving, like...
Right, so we know momentum is the energy of motion, okay? And it has to do with just two things, your mass and your velocity, and that's all there is, and they're equal players. The more mass you have, the bigger your football player is, the slower he has to move to do damage to you. And the smaller he is, the faster he has to move to do damage to you. I mean, it's just so obvious. Momentum is king. Momentum wins. Momentum is what happens when material things interact with material things. The only thing that happens is a bunch of momentum is exchanged. There's no such thing as this kinetic energy lie. Alright, so this is almost the end of the video, frankly. The rest of the video is just so abstract, there's no point. So again, he's just implying, he already did it. He already basically stated this had something to do with Newton when Newton believed in momentum. He didn't believe in kinetic energy.
An arrow in flight, or it could be rotation or vibration. However, I want to talk just about simple translational motion.
So what does that mean? He's not talking about simple translational motion in what context? The only it's all translational motion. Everything you're talking about is, the only way you can measure it is to translate it, is to collect it. So everything has to be translated to be collected. There's no energy until you collect it. I mean, there's no way to measure it. I mean, unless you know the mass ahead of time.
The equation for kinetic energy is mathematically straightforward.
All right, so it's, yes, and it's not the same one they used 270 years ago. Okay, so for the first 125 or 40 years it was mv squared, no half in front of it. So the numbers they were getting were gigantic. So the half obviously cuts the numbers in half. So all of their calculations were half off, and they didn't even notice till 1840-ish, where they decided to change it, stick this half in front. That's the true history. It's not good science, it's ugly science. I mean, you prove something for 150 years and then you stick a half in front of it? I mean, doesn't that indicate you really don't know what you're talking about? Doesn't that indicate that, whoa, this is pretty fallible if we could be so far off and we didn't even know it? I mean, yeah, and they still have no evidence. No video, nothing to show. They just have their silly calculations based on their wrong descriptions of reality. Alright, so that's probably enough.
If you have a mass m moving at a velocity v...
So he's just going to basically say what he already wrote, which is really pointless. Who are you talking to? Right, he's going to show the most abstract math you could possibly imagine. So in a few seconds he's going to start showing insane mathematics. And here he is explaining mv squared. Well, if you have a mass, and then you have a velocity, and then you square the velocity, and you have the product, you have kinetic energy, yeah.
Kinetic energy is simply 1/2 times the mass times the velocity squared. Ke equals 1/2 mv squared.
So he says the same thing 4 times. So people are going to understand this abstract crap math he puts on the board. Need that equation spelled out to them 4 times, but don't include the history. Don't include the part where, well, yeah, for 150 years we thought this mv squared things was the man, and yeah, we sold that as the truth, proven truth. Yeah, but it wasn't true. Yeah, we were wrong.
And you can use that equation to solve all sorts...
Oh, yes, right. You can solve all sorts of questions that nobody would ever ask. Okay, but you can't use it to solve the... Well, it doesn't take 4 times more fuel to go 60 miles an hour than 30. Just a fact, it doesn't. It's a fact. 8-pound balls going 16 miles an hour don't knock down more pins than 16-pound balls going 8 miles an hour. It's just a fact, okay, that a half-ton wrecking ball doesn't knock down 4 times more buildings than a 2-ton wrecking ball. It's just a fact that a bullet going out of one side of the spaceship doesn't turn the spaceship more than the gun barrel going out of the other side of the spaceship. Those are just facts that prove this doesn't work. Those experiments don't come out your way. And even a lever proves it doesn't work, because the lever becomes a free energy device according to your theory. And that argument was made 350 whatever years ago. Ignored, ignored, ignored. A glaring fact. You can't even, this stupid equation can't even pass a lever test. And these people are selling it as the truth. Why? Because it makes the universe more interesting. It's more fun. They can do more abstract bullshit equations with the square thing. You know, it's just too silly. All right, so enough of that. Oh, sorry, I didn't have the video on. You didn't miss much, frankly. It's just him talking. He showed the equation, blah, 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 blah. Not very interesting. Boy, this thing does not work. So even if I was trying to make it work, it wouldn't have worked right, probably. Anyway, so sorry about that.
Introductory physics problems. It's a great tool, and it serves scientists well.
So introductory physics problems. So they never solved it in any other way than abstractions. They merely write books saying, oh yeah, 8-pound balls knock down more pins. They write a book saying, yeah, it takes 4 times more fuel to go 60 miles an hour. They never show it with any piece of evidence. So it's just all bullshit. None of it's ever tested. None of it's ever put, on the scale and measured. It's just them saying so. Tragic. Alright, so on to other things. Alright, so the Dismars lab guy has done another one of these rickety experiments. So we've already been here and done this. The internet is covered with these stupid 1 minute and 21 second bullshit videos of crappy experiments done crappily, and he's just saying somehow that won him over and now he wants to do the same thing. I don't understand how he drew that conclusion. He should have drawn the conclusion that, ooh, this noise just makes a mess. This doesn't make science more understandable, it just makes a mess. Alright, so he's doing something fairly simple. Alright, so he's colliding a little marble into a big marble. And the big marble is 3.5 times more massive. And he comes up with numbers for the velocities that basically are pretty close to 3.5. A little bit more. So a little bit extra energy ends up in the big marble. Tiny bit, really. But why? Well, the simple explanation is they're rolling. Alright, so unlike Newton's cradle, these aren't two bodies that are just colliding with each other based on velocity in a direction. They have angular momentum. Most of their energy is probably in the form of their angular rotation. And that's not accounted for in this measurement of velocity. So when you're measuring its progress through space, you're not measuring all of its energy, all of its velocity, because it's rotating. So you can understand that if I had a single ball flying through space and it's not rotating and it hits another body, the interaction is going to be completely different than if it's spinning, and especially if it's spinning violently. Then when it hits the other body, it's going to the angular momentum is going to shoot it off at a high speed. So it's like a pinball machine. They have little swirly things, and your ball hits the swirly thing and it flies off at a tremendous velocity. Same thing. The angular momentum. So even though an object could be standing still in space, but the angular momentum is substantial, it can shoot things all kinds of directions. It can give them all kinds of energy. So, is there much point in not, the whole point of doing air track and different experiments is to get rid of friction and angular momentum, because they just confuse the subject. Because the real problem is that one object's going to be spinning this way, rotating, and it's going to hit another object that actually has to rotate in the same direction. And obviously when you're hitting it this way, it wants to go that way, right? It doesn't want to start rolling this way. It wants to almost roll the opposite way. So there's your dilemma, in that you're going to lose more or gain more energy depending on how that transition happens between the motion in this direction, which is going to be small compared to the rotational energy, and the fact that when you initially hit the other object, you're going to be hitting it in a direction that it has to reverse. Alright. So obviously the little marble has a lot more energy than its transitional linear velocity. Its linear velocity is only part of its energy. A big part of its energy is angular momentum. So that's why you got numbers that are a little higher. But again, what's the point of this video? It doesn't say anything, it doesn't draw any conclusions, it just, so the numbers were close. This one was right on 3.5, the other one's whatever it is, 3.7, the other one's 3.9. So one of them was a bit off, but yeah, this one's the 3.9 one. But again, it's 0.4 off. It's such a crude experiment that would be in the realm of a reasonable outcome, frankly. But regardless, but what's the point of this video? Is it proof of or proof against? Is it asserted for some reason? Is it provided for some reason? Because again, it doesn't account for, when you say velocity small marble, that's not the total energy of the small marble, obviously, because a big part of its velocity is in its rotation. Rotating matters. Okay. Anyway, so, it's a little more mysterious what its actual velocity, when you combine its angular momentum with its progress momentum, whatever you want to call it, its visual momentum, its visual velocity. Those two have to be added. But anyway, whatever. So what I'd ask this bar is I'm now going to show a clip from one of Brozo's videos. So this guy who comments on all your videos makes these assertions that he's figured everything out and done everything correctly. And I'm going to show you a clip from one of his videos where again he's asserting he proves something. And I'm just asking you, can't you just honestly call him out? Because he won't be called out by anybody else. One of you people have to catch him on his mistakes. He won't pay any attention unless one of you admit, oh yeah, I can see the error he made. Okay. So will you show some integrity here somewhere? I mean, is there really any point in having the conversation if we can't accept that there has to be a little bit of honesty in the conversation? I mean, you can't just keep dishonestly evading, the facts. Alright, so you should be able to see this. I'll move this over so you can see this is the important part, this little string here. You might be already able to see that this string is not straight up and down, okay? And his whole experiment is canted. So it's almost like this was deliberate. Like he did the experiment with the things parallel and he didn't get the outcome he wanted. And he found that, oh, if I cant it a little bit, so one of them is stretched, then I get the result I want. So this is where he engineers the failure. He only shows us videos where it comes out the way he wants it to. He does the experiment lots of different ways. Some of the ways Gary's right. Some of the ways Gary's wrong. And he obviously only publishes the ones that work out his way. And they're sloppy enough to allow him to do that. Alright, so you're going to clearly see why these two pendulums don't behave the same. Alright. Hopefully you're going to clearly see it. There, you saw it right there. Didn't you see? Did you see that? Did you see the little green thread? Oh, it's moving that way. Okay, and it's going to keep moving that way. Alright, so obviously they were even until, oops, that's starting to happen. So this one's moving in this direction as the fulcrum's actually moving. So that's the fulcrum of the lever. He's now moving the fulcrum and he's moving it down, right? So when stretched, it has to be a shorter line. So it's actually moving down as the other object's moving down. So it's at first it's adding energy. And then as it swings back, it's going to take back a little energy, and then it's going to add energy. So the resonant frequency of this oscillation is going to be different than the lever's oscillation. But the bottom line is you're going to end up adding energy to this system because you move the fulcrum. So you can see it, look at it go. So the yellow one is dead still. And the green one is a lot different than dead still. Really, you have to, you see this, okay, a dramatic defect in the experiment. So obviously these aren't the same anymore. This isn't an even test anymore, right? So when it's all the way in the canted position is when the two are at the same height. So just realize how big an effect it's had on the oscillation of the lever. And so we have a compound lever versus a regular lever, and obviously this is the cause of the fact that they behave differently. They would have behaved the same if you didn't do that, if you didn't stretch one of them further and cause this defect where the fulcrum's gravity was different than the other fulcrum. It had to move in gravity because you pulled it against it. I mean, it's just such an obvious defect. Okay, now, these liars, that are just so pervasive. I mean, I'll play a little bit at regular speed. You can just see look at the oscillation. Bad experiment. Okay, can you admit that that's a substantial defect, this bar? So we at least admit that, oh yeah, it's nice that you did the experiment, Steve, but that's a huge defect, frankly. You can't really claim that, hey, I've done an equal comparison, and no, you really haven't. Ugh. I shouldn't even have to say these things. But whatever. It's such an obvious defect. I mean, it's right there, obvious. So we're supposed to believe Brozo has done this experiment dozens of times, different ways. He says, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what I've changed. I changed everything. I did this. I did that. I changed everything. I tried everything. And he didn't notice in all of those experiments that vibration. I mean, it's so obvious he didn't notice it. Yeah, okay. I don't think so. I don't think that's a viable explanation. So anyway, he's just a fake and a fraud. But anyway, a faker and a fraud. All right, so yeah, we'll go to a couple of, I mean, the comments are just so stupid, but we'll go to a couple of them. All right, so the comments on that Brozo video. So this Michael Falwell, he's an idiot, a jerk, and all this stuff, but I mean, this is just such a lie in terms of, what's the point of this? So he says, great work, Steve, here as always, Steve. Right, so he's basically saying, yes, another one of your crappy experiments with a huge giant flaw in it. So another lie experiment, okay. I listened to his response, quite disappointing, Tiba. I thought at least there would be loads of flaws and problems he would invent. So I spent the last minute of the video showing exactly what I just showed. That the thing is, the whole lever's oscillating. Of course it doesn't have the same period. You're oscillating the fulcrum. You're moving the fulcrum in space. Of course it can't oscillate the same. Of course. And he says nothing. He says as if I didn't have a response. Of course I had a response. I figured it out in the video. So while I was making the video, I noticed it right after I had finished the video. I noticed the clip. I said, wait a minute, what the hell's that? And I saw it moving. I said, okay, I'll add 1 minute to the video and just point that out. There's the obvious flaw. And I even said in the video that every time you watch a Stephen Bro video, this is all your job is. Find out how Steve fucked it up. Because every video will have a reason why he fucked it up. I mean, he did the thing of lifting little pieces, to measure momentum. And he was too stupid to make the pieces heavier than the objects hitting them. So obviously he was launching the little objects instead of lifting the objects. And again, there's a big difference between hitting something and pushing something. Anyway, he just went with flat out denial instead. So that didn't happen. I posed all kinds of problems. You have to be exactly precise. The two pendulums have to be identical in lots of ways, or this experiment isn't going to work. Okay, so I pointed those out. Reasonable reasons why the experiment came out the way it did. And there was a real glaring one. Okay, and the fact is it's glaring. It's gigantic as a source of cause to the effect. Yeah. All right. I mean, it's just so dishonest. All right. So, you know, and this guy's saying you should drink colloidal silver. It's good for wounds. I don't think you should be drinking it, but whatever. People are crazy. Anyway, well, he is crazy. I mean, literally. He thinks he's invented anti-gravity, so he is crazy. But anyway, I don't even want to look at the John Walker. Let's see. The equal sides move slower, so I don't know. It makes no sense. Anyway. Yeah, so we'll leave that at that. Okay, so the Jake Jerusi guy has enough something to at least force him now and then to address something. But he doesn't. He's not going to do it, right? So, I mean, may I suggest going to Draft's latest video and just address what he says starting at 50:35. So it's probably where I'm just pointing out how, well, it's twice as much energy anyway, so it doesn't even matter if you can somehow screw up the oscillating speeds. It doesn't change the fact that one side of the lever has twice as much energy on it as the other side of the lever. So you really haven't addressed anything. So anyway, but yeah, Brozo just evades by saying he doesn't really care, okay, about the subject, and he doesn't care about clarifying. So he won't provide that answer. And you know, this is the funnier part, though. Unfortunately, there are so many layers of confusion from my perspective. It's like trying to untangle a ball of knotted string. So it's a lever, and he's had a year to think about it, and he considers it still some kind of, oh no, you have to give me, you know, I need a decade to figure it out. You know, while someone else is tangling up again and telling me I've done a rotten job of untangling. Well, you haven't untangled anything. That's the whole point. You just keep faking experiments. So instead of actually doing a video explaining how you think energy moves between the two objects on a lever, you know, instead of doing that, you just keep faking things to fit your mindset. Again, it's clear that, you know, in all your experiments, the launching speed is different. It's not the half mass, twice the speed that I suggested in the videos. So obviously our results are different because I'm assuming the logical outcome is that you can't destroy the momentum. So momentum has to be conserved, so therefore the lighter object has to go faster. Yeah. But anyway, so he just, you know, part of me wants to say, fair enough, leave it tangled, whatever. I mean, the whole thing in here, you know, is just a pile of shit where he's just evading his responsibility to make a rational argument in defense of things, and he won't do it. And instead, he'll just keep publishing these terrible experiments that just mislead people. So he's just a Ken Wheeler. He's just a faker. Ken Wheeler damn well knows light isn't bent by magnetism. And he damn well knows, you know, that a ferrocell has to have the sources, the individual sources, or the effect doesn't happen. I mean, he knows these things, and he doesn't care, because he's telling a fable, and it fits his fable. And that's all Brozo is doing. And it's just sad that no one will call him out on his fraud and his fakery. Okay, so I think that's probably enough. Maybe I'll go back to the Dispar video and see what the new lies by Stephen Bro are. Yeah, so go see his new lies. Alright, so he has done another video, rolling crap. Again, rolling crap. Okay, down wedges or whatever. Frankly, I don't find the experiments interesting just because, again, I know that friction isn't even. It isn't a great way to decide how much momentum something has, how much friction takes from it, because it doesn't take the same amount of energy from every kind of object. So it's really kind of useless as a clinical tool for measuring energy. But go ahead and do whatever you want. But yeah, there's a point where I'm not even going to waste the minutes, 1 minute at a time. But anyway, so back to this video. I mean, maybe I'll waste it just for the comments because they're always so bad, and you don't say anything to repair what's on your video as a comment. I learned the hard way the other day that tracks cause big problems with the speed of balls rolled down them. So that's kind of stupid, just because tracks at least minimize the amount of contact and the amount of friction. Alright, especially when the balls are different sizes. Well, yes, of course, that would matter because the center of their mass will now be lower. Okay, so yes, obviously they fall further if the center of their mass goes lower. So the smaller ball will fall deeper into the track, so it actually goes lower. Alright, the only way to avoid this is not to use tracks, says you. So this is another, this is a brozoium. The only way to avoid this is not to use them. You know, maybe you can, maybe you can figure out that all you have to do is have a track that's suited to the size of the balls you're using, or find different size balls. Anyway, a go. I don't know what the a go is. I don't know what it means. All and simply let the balls roll on a hard surface like glass. So again, rolling on a hard surface like glass, right? So you're saying, well, now what sense does this make? Because now you have rotational energy built into something. So if you rolled it to cause the rotation, and then you put it across glass, well, now the rotational energy isn't getting into the surface very well. So now you're really only measuring how much how much propellant velocity it has versus how much of its velocity is in the form of rotational energy. So now you've really split the two. So the velocity won't be telling you much at all. In which case all problems go away. So just absolute mush. Okay. For instance, when I first tried to launch the 62 32 gram balls using Gary's elastic band method, I set the balls on an inch-long track similar to yours, just very short, a bit wider. And guess what? It messed up. Oh, so I guess the mess up was it came out my way. Anyway, the test so much it made the heavy ball go further. So just pointing out that, wow, so it messed it up, so you got results that were so stupid, okay, that you got more energy, more velocity in the slower, the twice as heavy object got more velocity. So it screwed up so much. And yet you're not recognizing that if the experiments are that delicate, that tiny little defect could make such a substantial change in the outcome, and you're pretending that all of your experiments are a proof, when that's the standard, that frankly you can come up with all kinds of results. And so you can just engineer an experiment to produce the results you want. You're just conceding the argument. So I got rid of the short track and put glass plate there, and then gave the perfect result. So again, it's always perfect for his purposes. But we haven't seen that one. So it's another video. He got perfect results, but he hasn't shown. Okay. I am too tired to think about your results. They're kind of so obvious that why would you even bother thinking about them very hard? What was your expectation exactly? Free momentum? I mean, what do you really expect to get out of the experiment? Free momentum? Okay. I'm desperate to get 2 hours sleep. Oh, all this, how aggrieved and how rough is, he's got to put this in every video. So he has all this time to type all this crap and then complain about how he doesn't have any time. Yeah, amazing. Before all starts again today, but if the results are in any way usual from what you expected, consider the possibility that the tracks are interfering with the ball's ability to go at the speed expected them to. These are things sent to try us. So again, see, they're just so aggressive in trying to prove their fake, crappy science. They're not trying to find the truth. And the truth is that the experiment is you've already made it too complicated by having two motions in the experiment, the rotation and the motion. You've already made a mess of it, because we can't really know the total momentum of the ball you propelled, because its translational velocity won't tell you its total momentum because of the angular momentum. So anyway, is there any hope that these people will get some clue someday and just, rationally accept that the evidence has got to be better than this? You can't be asserting for these absolute fundamental truths with evidence this shitty. And again, mv squared is the extraordinary theory. It's the one that's bizarre. Momentum is solid. All the physicists believe in it. All the physicists will say, oh yeah, you have to conserve momentum. So it's not the one that should have to come up, meet the challenge of providing evidence. The evidence for momentum exchanges are all over the place. You can't avoid them. I mean, they're in the lever. The lever is proving it. What do you really think? Do you really think levers just convert momentum, or do you think levers make kinetic energy? Which one do you think is the truth? That they just convert one form of force into another form of force that's exactly the same amount of force. They're just taking something with a big V and a little m and converting it into a big M and a little v. That's all they can do. They can't make energy. So don't you think when you're extraordinarily saying they do, that you should have to prove it? I can't believe, I really can't believe I found an argument this solid, and it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good the argument is. The cement heads just will not accept that it could be possible that science made a mistake. It's not possible, even though their whole history is littered with making mistakes and doing their erasing and putting their 1/2 in front of it. The whole kinetic energy theory has mistake written all over it. The guy who invented it died nobody. Okay, it was resurrected as show physics, Ken Wheeler bullshit, and then they stuck a 1/2 in front of it. I mean, it's a disgustingly silly history. As a scientific theory, it's mockable and laughable. And yet all of this resistance to accepting what just seems obvious. You can only have one. There's only one truth. There's a universe, and it either has kinetic energy in it or it has momentum in it, but it can't have both. And I think it's just so obvious that momentum is in the universe and kinetic energy is just a story. It's a 3-bear, 3-pig, little blind mice. It's a little story. It has nothing to do with reality. Alright, I think that's enough of a video, but we'll pause and think about it. Alright, guess we'll do a little updating just on the videos on the website. So yesterday's video was the hour-long Brozo's experiments, and just pointing out the possible flaws. What's the gimmick? Why is he playing this game? Test your knowledge. I mean, it's just so obnoxious. And he doesn't know that you can't oscillate the whole lever. Yeah. Anyway, so another video was on the 1.4 thing. It's not a thing. It's not real physics. There's no professors arguing that this 1.4 thing happens. That if you pick up an 8-pound ball, that some bowling ball, somehow you can only throw it 1.4 times faster than a 16-pound ball. There's no law, there's no rule, it's all just bullshit. Alright, and then there's some other video on other Brozosian lies. And then another one more related to the Dispar guy, but on gravity and friction. So, and then there was the Dispar lab video dealing with, again, friction as being a way of measuring something's energy. And obviously it doesn't take energy away from an object evenly. It really depends on your shape and your mass and your velocity. You'll all decide how you interact with friction. So friction just kind of depends on what the thing is made out of. If it's made out of rubber, it has more friction. And if it's made out of steel, less friction. So the amount of energy it takes from an object changes depending on how fast it's going and how much it weighs, how much it sinks into. the surface you're using to steal the energy, to take the energy away. But it just doesn't do it evenly. It's not a standard ruler. Okay, so no point in using it to decide how much energy something has. But anyway, they'll keep doing it anyway. Alright, so I think that's enough of a video. So this has been another draftphysics.com video presentation. Debate physics also, but again, the debate has to have some kind of connection and interaction. Clearly no one wishes to do that. So Despard is in little sound bites dealing with some of my arguments, but they're just in sound bites and just the pieces he chooses to respond to. So it's not much of a debate. So anyway, till the next time and such, so forth and whatnot. Yeah, that's it.